hopefully this will be a relatively quick talk. I've got about 30 minutes here before I think we all have to be back with Gab for the much more exciting talk. But I was garnered into having this conversation by a group of people that are over here on the left side of the room that are working on this project called Common Cloud Controls. They were like, Jared, like you always seem so passionate about why controls are so messed up in the world. You should come and tell everybody about that so they want to come and join us and talk about the space. So I'm going to run through this. I actually really wish I had a bunch of banks up here because I think you're all the ones who live this truth every single day. But it gets regaled to me along the way. I work for Microsoft. I run a team in Azure, an engineering group called the Microsoft Cloud for Financial Services. It has nothing to do with this space outside of the fact that I try to meet the needs of banks around the world and try to help them get to the cloud in some way, shape, or form. That's about the only thing that's Microsoft-oriented from here on out, except for the fact that I used AI to generate my slides. So that's about it. All right, so let's first talk about what the heck financial institutions are trying to do. And I think you have to start all the way back here. Like, what's the business problem that they're actually trying to solve at the end of the day? And at least as I walk around the world and talk to banks, they usually give me some format of these. And every bank's a little bit different. First is that they're trying to like really quickly innovate. They're trying to come up with new offers. They're trying to come up with new ways to go to business. They are worried about the competitors coming in who are like these new banks that don't even have brick and mortar stores. And they're like, oh my God, these people, they're going to do something new. They have increasing competitors from things that aren't even really financial services at the end of the day. Like Starbucks has over $1 billion in cash in management right now, which is wild because they're an app that serves people coffee, not a bank in the traditional sense. And so they're really worried about how they go after new stuff really quickly. And I promise this is going to come back around to cloud controls. The other ones come after it and go, okay, actually, we are worried about risk. We're worried about controls. We're worried about our regulator who's going to potentially shut us down if there's some sort of an issue. They've got all sorts of worries in this space and how they do things better here. Another fun fact for you on this top one. I talked to a bank recently, a couple weeks ago, who was telling me that because of their controls landscape and a lot of their legacy infrastructure, to create a new checking account in their bank, just a new one with a couple of new features, 9 months, $9 million. That's how much time and energy it costs them to go through their whole system to go and actually get something out the door. Which is kind of leading towards why this needs to be better. Last but not least, banks are increasingly outsourcing versus insourcing things. They're starting to realize that maybe I don't need to be the best banking app provider out there. I can just go and pay somebody who does it better. And they're starting to integrate more and more with these best-of-breed SaaS partners. These people that are building all sorts of different capabilities. But again, when they go to integrate with those, if they don't have a really great control framework in place, this becomes really, really difficult. So this is the types of things I hear them talking to me about. This is like when you go all the way up to the CEO or kind of their directs, these are the types of things they start asking us. Like, I need to make my business more blah. But as they go and try to actually get it done, tech challenges get in the way. So they've got these super legacy infrastructures. I mean, I'm sure you've seen these like AS400s sitting somewhere deep in the bowels of the bank with like 60-year-old code on it, which is hard to even say out loud. They've got issues with compliance is another big point. This is going to be the focus of this talk. And Jesus, the ball keeps moving. Like every time they turn around, there's some new thing, and AI is doing this every 3 months. There's a new thing out there. I mean, we ourselves, I think we just renamed half of our Copilot ecosystem into agents now. And it's like, whoa, hold on. Now there's a whole new thing I have to worry about. And so all three of these are really slowing their ability to meet these goals at the end of the day. So we decided that creating a set of frameworks as a world, as a set of frameworks around compliance was going to be a way to help this. And FINOS decided that we needed to add one more to the list. Come on, load. There we go. So there's a few of them that exist in the world, but of course, we're banks, right? This doesn't work exactly out of the box. We need to figure out something. To give you an idea, these are the ones that Microsoft has worked with in some way, shape, or form to achieve compliance for our infrastructure. And there's over 100 of them. I think this is a slide from like 2018. You might notice the dates are a little old. 2019 maybe. And 2022, okay, there we go. Maybe it's a little newer. It was an old slide. Anyway, what I'm getting at is there's crap tons of these things. And the struggle is that depending on who you talk to, first, you could start with one of these. But then two is then they go and customize the crap out of it. So what I typically see is they start with one of these frameworks, and then they go and say, ooh, we've learned, And it could be a regulator that's come in and told them something. It could be their own policy, or maybe they got attacked for something and they're like, ooh, we need to put in place a control that's a little bit different. And so they go and define this whole nother set of custom controls on top of it that make them special, right? And there's, like, to give an example, I think some of these frameworks like CIS says, you must have encryption or something. And then they'll go and say, whoa, for me, I'm a bank. I need to have a FIPS level 3 certified HSM where I'm the only one with access to that key. And so they add this extra little bit to it. And the struggle I have as a cloud provider is then that gets multiplied by every single bank I talk to. And so not only do I have the 100 to start with, but I've got all these changes that are then multiplied for every single time this happens. And what that means is that when one bank comes to me with one requirement, it's really, really tough for me to go and say, that's what we should work on. Because there's literally thousands of these things. Like, my world looks like Spreadsheet Hell, right? I get these gigantic spreadsheets. You've probably all, if you're attending this talk, hopefully you probably work in this space. I'm guessing at some point you've been guilty of making one of these and probably sending it to your cloud provider, your SaaS provider, one of your providers to say, here's the things you need to do so that it can be there, right? And I have to juggle all of these from all of these different providers. And the struggle is that I'm not doing the best possible thing that I can for you. I want you to be successful. We, as cloud providers, want you to be successful, but it's really tough when we get 20,000 different asks as opposed to one ask that says, here is the standard, here's what it needs to do. And it's a pain in the butt for you because then you get to evaluate, especially just for you and your unique requirements, as opposed to everybody gaining from the common approach of validating something together in a way that isn't really a business advantage for most financial services companies. You don't go and say, wow, my ability to have FIPS level 3 controls is like differentiating me from the next bank down the way, right? Like, nobody is really differentiating on that at the end of the day. I mean, granted, the banks that get attacked probably are differentiated in a way from the banks that don't get attacked, but we'll leave that aside for a second. We're all just trying to not get attacked, right? There's some crazy threat vectors out there that we just don't want to have coming in to our environment. Okay, so how to give a little bit of history and a little bit of empathy and less making fun of banks, which is an odd thing to do at a financial services conference. Banks are evolving to this point. So I think they started early days with just a few workloads. They had their in-house controls, and they had like a standard benchmark. So they would go and say, oh, I'm going to be CIS compliant. They did that, and they got their like 3 workloads out the door, and life was good. Then they started to add more. They started to say, okay, well, actually, I'm going to have a lot of workloads. And depending on who you are in here, like I saw some JP Morgan Chase people out here. I don't know if any of you are in that company, because I'm about to make fun of you a little bit. They have more developers than Azure does working on these workloads. I just want to like put that into perspective for you. All the developers in our cloud are still less than the number of developers that just do JP Morgan Chase's work in the space. So then they go and change things. They go, okay, maybe I need to add this one extra thing, or I need to correct for some dumb developer in the space that did something terrible once. And they start to build this thing up. And then eventually, they get into these full CSPM systems where they're looking at the code you wrote, the architecture you had, was it pre-approved before it ever got there? How do we prevent it from getting to production in the first place? How do we test it? And they've built these very custom controls, pipelines, CI/CD things. And again, it makes sense. These are how you're keeping yourself safe, and you're reacting to issues that have happened in your world, right? I'm sure you've all, if you've ever been in one of those worlds, been in one of those war rooms. I think it was the guy Kelsey who was talking about the war room. I've been locked in one of these myself, where at the end they were like, no, like nobody's leaving this room until you've like put this control in place, until we make sure that nobody ever deletes that IP address ever again. How do we do that? And you have to get it done, and that creates this in this place that we're at. Okay. I promise I'm going to get through the woe and terribleness soon and get into like goodness is coming on the other end. But I figured we'd wallow in the fun here for a second. So banks also come to me and they ask me these questions over and over. How do I know if my approach is the best? Like, dear Microsoft, you must have worked with a couple of other banks, right? Like 1 or 2 maybe? Like someone must have done this before. Like, this isn't secret sauce or differentiating. I mean, granted, I don't want to put my control framework out online on the internet for anybody to come and grab, but it's not really a competitive advantage. Can I learn from others? And how do I keep up with this rapidly changing landscape? I had a fun conversation, another I'll make fun of myself in this one, so I'm equal opportunity. We have a feature called Trusted Launch. It's a way for VMs to load and make sure that nobody's been screwing with your VM. It's great. And we put it out, and so of course a bank was like, "Ooh, yes, Trusted Launch. This is totally the thing." And they went and they spent 3 months. They integrated into their controls. They tried to deploy it everywhere. The thing is Trusted Launch didn't work with Azure Backup. So as soon as they put it out there, all of their ability to back up their stuff was no longer a thing, right? And you can imagine how that conversation went for me on the other end of like the guy recommending Trusted Launch as a great solution, right? And they're like, "Oh my God, I never want to be the first person to do a new security control ever again. Show me that it works. I want to see that somebody's looked at it, somebody's deployed something, somebody has done this before, right? I want to race to be in second place." That is what every bank out there in the world wants to do in this space. So they need to keep up with the new stuff coming in, but just behind the front of that edge so that they don't have to deal with some of the pain of it. This is what banks want effectively, at least what they tell me they want at the end of the day. And this is my best AI banker. Worth noting, it's tough on regulators too. Regulators who have to actually come in at the end of the day and say, like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And they often walk up and they'll say, "Okay, well, what's good?" And you guys will say, banks will say, "What's good?" to the regulator. And the regulator will be like, "I don't know, why don't you show me?" And then they have this lovely back and forth conversation, which is a problem for them, right? Because then they have to evaluate 18 different ways of doing this. Is that going to be the best? Unclear. Plus, they have all of these complex integrations with every single bank out there, with all the SaaS providers, all these things that they have to do, and a ton of different forms of evidence that they go and receive, and they have to evaluate to do a good job. This isn't great for them either, because they have to go and understand all of this. Okay, hopefully everybody's aligned that this is a problem.
Cloud controls are out of control.
Cloud controls are out of control. Give Eddie credit for the fun name for the session. Any questions on the problem statement? Because the rest is all about the solution.
It's interesting to see the other perspective.
What?
It keeps shelling out, "Can you do this, can you do this?" And then you get hit up with these thousands of unique.
Yes. I assume when you say the other perspective, aka the cloud provider perspective. Yeah, of the guy who all I want to do is help you at the end of the day. But literally when I get 1,600 requirements in a spreadsheet per bank of 100 banks, and you're like, "Oh, okay, how am I going to do this? Which ones do I focus on?" And I can go and focus and spend a year fixing one of them, and then the next one comes and it's like, "You didn't do anything for me."
And I'll tell you, from a bank's perspective, it's easier to convince you than all of the other banks.
Yes. Yes, very much so. This is probably one of the biggest reasons we are in FINOS in the first place, is it's so critical to have all of the banks talking together and agreeing on what the need is, because that's so much more powerful to be able to say, like, even 5 banks agreed on this, and we can go after it and show a best practice and get communal learning out of this thing that really is a joint exercise against our enemy, which is attackers who are coming after us every single day. And I don't know if you've watched the news at all, but like, we have this problem too. As a company, we've got whole campuses of people coming after us every single day and finding wildly creative ways to get into our infrastructure. That's a whole nother TED Talk that we can do some other time. Any other comments, questions here? It's a small room, very happy to take them. All right, moving onward. So, in walks Common Cloud Controls. So this new project, new-ish, I don't know, how old's the project? A year?
Year and a half.
Year and a half, okay, 18 months. So Common Cloud Controls is this collaborative effort between financial institutions, cloud service providers, regulators to develop industry-wide controls. So we looked at the 100 requirements out there and we said, you know what, we're gonna make it better, we're gonna add another one, it's gonna be great. And I give them a little bit of a hard time on this, but it actually is great. And it is a line view that is financial services specific. At the end of the day, I see it as the goal here is to create an industry common cloud control set for financial services organizations, providers, and regulators to all use so that we can assure strong compliance of cloud services. And this is not just a Microsoft thing. I just happen to be the person that was voluntold to come up here and do this. It is a common thing for all of us. And I think a rising tide here floats all boats. Meaning if we can all agree on this and we can all go to the same thing, it's great for you all because you can look at it and go, all my cloud providers meet this. I don't have to reevaluate it each time. You can start from something instead of start from scratch, and you can learn along the way and grow together. So let's talk about the approach and how this actually works. AI, oh my God. I swear there's more on this slide that you can't see on this particular projector. I'm gonna blame AI on that one. But the approach here, so first off, it starts with some reference architectures to say, okay, like what is the types of things we wanna go after? I'll get into those more in a minute. Then we have to say, okay, well, first off, how are we gonna even talk about this? I don't know if you know, but it's a pain in the butt to talk about the same infrastructure between 3 cloud providers, because we all call it something friggin' different. Like Azure likes to use our, like, name it what it is, but it's a horribly long name to pronounce. You know, Google does their own thing. AWS uses acronyms that don't make a lot of sense. We all have our own problems. Anyway, a virtual machine is called a different thing in each of these, so we need to have a common taxonomy for what a virtual machine means or what a object storage is, and you need to be able to say it generically. And weirdly, we're one of the first people to go and do this and really develop a common taxonomy to talk about the same sort of artifact throughout different cloud providers. Then we went and said, okay, well, then what are the threats that we're trying to protect against? Again, there's a bunch of great frameworks out there. CCC has chosen MITRE, and it uses the MITRE framework and attack framework to go and say, okay, these are the threats we need to consider. Then you go and establish a set of controls. And so those controls, again, has been picked in the NIST space. So this is largely NIST mapped, which is a super common framework for most, and most people are pretty familiar with it. And these are all, by the way, per service. So you're looking at them for like a VM. What are the threats? What are the controls? Or an object storage account or a particular service. So this is not generic to all of the cloud. It is per service. And then last but not least, and this is the one that I think is extra fun, is around evidence. So not just can we define the threat, define what a good control is, but evidence that it has been met on a given cloud provider, leveraging a test. So we can go and say, yes, that network traffic is encrypted between those 2 points because we've tested it and we've checked, and it is. And you can run those at any time against a live environment and get back the answer of, yes, we are protected in this way. And that way also, FINOS can go and certify, and I'm gonna use certify with some air quotes until it is more broadened, that a given service meets the control set that they've set out, which is the ultimate goal. So then we can go back to the reference architectures, and we can build an architecture and say, here's how we do a AI RAG model on these set of services that we're sure upholds the set of controls, meets the threats that we need, and here's evidence that we can provide to a regulator that this actually happens. So that is what CCC is trying to do. Now, if you're like me, I looked at it and this is kind of what I saw, and I was like, oh God. Do you know how many services Azure has at the end of the day? There's 1,500 of these bad boys. Now, granted, you don't all use all those, but there's like 1,500 of them. This is a lot of work. This is like turning the Titanic around. How do we go and make this better? And so I think CCC has taken a good approach, is to say, let's start small. Let's start with a couple of services, and let's go get started. So some of those first milestones, they aligned with the AI Readiness Group, which I'm quite happy with. So they've taken a standard RAG LLM pattern and said, okay, this is a common one that a lot of banks need, that everybody's trying to figure out the controls for and trying to figure out a way along. They've picked that as the pattern. They've picked a set of enabling services for it. Right now, they've got 4, I want to say, that are being worked on: object storage, VMs, networking, and an AI one. Keep me honest. And databases. 5. There you go. See, learn a new one every day. There you go. And so the game plan is to get V1 out the door for those set of services. Say, here it is. Now, in this space, I will say more than anything, there is one thing we need from all of you in the room. I thought about doing the Uncle Sam version here, and then I realized a lot of people were less US based and probably wouldn't get why there was a random American man pointing at them. But we need banks and financial services groups to come in and help. We need them to look at what we have and to validate that it's right. There's a steering group that Eddie will be happy to fill you in on, where we need feedback on, are these the right controls? Would this pass muster at your bank? If you want to contribute more broadly, we would love to have your help developing these things, or maybe even contributing. If you have something in your own company that, again, isn't really like God's gift to your company and why you exist because of your control framework, come and contribute it and say, like, here's ours, here's how we started. It gives them a really great spot to start from and to start getting this out the door and start iterating it in a place where everybody can go and use it. And then last but not least is to use them. So go try these things. See if it would pass. Go and actually be a first adopter. Again, putting on my Microsoft hat again. It's way easier for me to go and get all of these things met in our cloud if there's 5 of you actually using it or trying to use it in some way, shape, or form. Same's true with Google, same's true with AWS. We all thrive on customer demand. So the more of you that are actually using it or promising to use it once it gets to a certain level, the more resources we can throw at it because it makes more sense for us. And it's kind of the snowball effect, right? Is as you contribute more, we contribute more, and it just kind of keeps the flywheel going in that sense. So we would love if you could come work with us, come work with the CCC group. This is the GitHub thing. I swear you could like see the GitHub logo there better at one point. I don't know what happened there. But yeah, give us feedback on the controls, try them out, contribute. As you can probably guess, these people up here in the front of the room are a great set of people to talk to if you have any questions about it. Questions on CCC, or why it's important, or life in general, Microsoft recent attacks, so we can go any direction you want. Yeah.
Regulators involved at all? You get any participation from anybody on spot check what you guys do?
That is a great question, and you had the last chat with the regulator, yeah? Was it? I know I've at least had a couple of auditor types also chat with me, like S&P Global does a lot of auditing for us in a good way, and they've been chatting about coming and helping in that space as well, which I'm excited about. Other questions, comments? Oh yeah, up here.
Well, I was part of CCC.
I was gonna say, you're like a contributor, so I'm really curious where this is going.
I'd love to know
Yeah.
if OSCAL still being leveraged.
It is our desire to leverage OSCAL as the format for collecting and reporting on that evidence, yes. I think we're all very OSCAL aligned, though we haven't really done much with it yet. Speaking on behalf of the larger group. I have a feeling you're going to be the guy who ends up figuring this out. Like, yeah, great, the FINOS ambassador asking questions, yes. What else am I using? What else are you using?
What has been considered?
What has been evaluated in this space? Yeah, so look, one of the biggest problems in this space, as I mentioned, right, there's 1,000 other frameworks out there, and we really do not want to duplicate something that somebody else has already done. We want to leverage the best and build on top of it with an FSI-specific lens. So we've looked at a bunch of different control frameworks like, I don't know, SIS and MITRE Ingenuity and a bunch of other things. And I think MITRE ATT&CK and NIST have been the two that we've really gone around. OSCAL for the reporting format, of course. I don't know if there's a specific one you're wanting knowledge on. I mean, that's kind of where we've landed at the moment. I would say the one that pisses me off the most is the taxonomy one. Like that we have to invent our own taxonomy to even have these conversations feels wild to me, as opposed to is there really no taxonomy common between cloud providers and how to talk about cloud resources. Maybe it's annoyed you too in the world, but that's the one that annoys me most that I wish there was something for. I'm real jealous of the Focus folks that talked this morning and what they've been able to do. Yeah. Do you want to, you look like you have an answer to this. Do you want to take a stab? I can too.
Well, we have an entire project dedicated to that approach. So the Compliant Financial Infrastructure Project is a sister group to CCC. And that's your answer.
Yes.
There's an entire workspace dedicated to that.
Yeah, and they've got, I will say they have some of the best naming I've seen in test systems. They have like a pirate analogy going on where you like go on raids against your own infrastructure and like take hostages. I don't even know.
I don't think that was one.
I've just been enjoying it along the way. Yeah, it's a great analogy, whoever came up with that. Cool. Other questions, thoughts? Otherwise, I am 4 minutes early. You're welcome. Rob? Yeah, one more.
Yeah, so let's say we get these 5 or 6 financial services firms to sort of step up and say, we're committed to CCC.
Yeah.
What happens next?
So assuming they're committed to CCC means they're going to use it as their cloud control platform. Along the way, in my mind, there's going to be problems. Like, it's not going to be perfect. Absolutely guaranteed. No control framework ever is. If it is, then they're lying to you, right? From there, then you start aggregating those asks against people like me and other cloud providers and say, here is what we need. This needs to be easier. This needs to have some extra level of protection. And for me, it is so, so valuable to go to one of my product groups, whatever that is. Let's say you need FIPS level 3 protection directly at a hardware level tied into your NICs and your VMs, which isn't today available in most clouds outside of some real special stuff. Okay, great. If that's what you need, then I can go and say, hey, I know this is going to take us $50 million to go and get done, but look, I have 5 banks that spend $1 billion a year with me. Like, let's go and get those things done. And it's way easier for me to prioritize those asks or debate them. So like, let's say I come back to you and say, this is a dumb ask, here's why. Then we have a group of banks versus a group of CSPs that can have that debate out in a public forum, making us all safer and better. That's my take. That's what I would love to see in the world. That's literally why we joined FINOS. Cool. All right, thank you.